So in this segment, we're going to be talking about It's a Farce, the Brexit border control site now used to inspect Ukrainian pets. So what this article is about is the big import facility import facilities that we made to check goods coming in from the EU to make sure that they were up to scratch and there weren't any issues with them. So it is built on a vast 230 acre site, which a total cost put at more than £100 million, and has space for 1,700 heavy goods vehicles. Security staff are on patrol at several checkpoints around its 12-foot high perimeter fence. Inside are new state-of-the-art buildings and equipment for inspecting imports from Europe. So this is the Kent Import Checks facility site. It was meant to be state-of-the-art, where lorries would come in with imports, would get sent to get checked in the hopes that we would avoid major build-ups on the motorways of lorries. Now it's almost abandoned. Could probably shoot a good horror film there, though. This cost £100 million, which could get you one Jack Grealish in the current football market. I think that's how much money they've wasted here. To be fair, Man City wasted money on him as well, so... but more than 6 months after completion, this heavily guarded supposed showpiece of a newly independent Britain lies all but deserted. It is labelled by people who live nearby as the great white elephant of Brexit, spanking new but largely redundant. The only imports being inspected here are a few pets from Ukraine. This potentially would have cost the council money to build and maintain, because places like this, the council have to partially fund. They would profit from any fees collected and things like that, but clearly that's not going to happen unless they're charging these Ukrainian pet owners a lot of money. Maybe that horror movie idea has legs after all. So you talk to the local people of Sevington Inland, talk to the local people about the Sevington Inland Border Facility in Kent, and they are beyond despair. No one knows when or if this giant testament to the UK's increasingly costly and chaotic exit from the EU will ever be used for its intended purposes. You know, the good people of Kent voted Tory, they voted for Brexit, so they knew what they were voting for, right? The thing and the other, the other lorry parks must be an eyesore as well. For the lovely countrysides of Kent. So you've got this basically lorry park, essentially, or import checks facility site, and you've got the other big lorry park that's used for exports. Do the people of Kent really like this stuff? On Friday, the odd lorry trundled in for HMRC customs checks, which are now handled in a small section of the site. Sevington was built in a little over 2 years, mainly to conduct import inspections on goods of plant and animal origin from the EU, so essentially SPS checks, a responsibility of the Department for Environment, Rural and Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA. But the regime of rules it was built to administer has never come into force because of U-turns forced on the government by the dawning realisation that trade operates better without friction. It's not just that. I don't think that's the full main issue here. The cost of doing these checks is immense. The staffing and maintenance costs are comically large. The cost of fish fingers would have gone up 2%, and the cost of some cheeses by 70%, according to Jacob Rees-Mogg, and that 2% figure might not seem much in the context of fish fingers, but it's still added cost. The cost of small importers would have gone up dramatically, which is something I've talked about before in the context of, I think it was a Greek importer based in London who would buy niche amounts of products from Greece, like sheep milk, cheese. But I think the Tories realised how damaging the cost to do these checks would be, and I think EU exporters would just give up on the UK because it would cost them more to export here, a double whammy, not to mention the fact that the food delays could cause shortages on the shelves. And certain things you don't mess with, and one of those is supermarkets, that's for sure. But when building work was near completion in 2021, ministers started having doubts about the effect of burdensome checks as trade with the EU declined. Last spring, Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Minister for Brexit Opportunities, delayed the start of the checks for the fourth time. Remember, we were meant to do this stuff, I think, the summer of 2021 or 2020, I can't remember the exact year the transition period ended, but it was meant to be within... We should have started immediately after the transition period ended, but they said they were going to implement the check 6 months after the period ended, but they just didn't. Fearing that these would be too bureaucratic and costly for businesses, and cause more tailbacks on the Kent's roads. You would have, huge build-ups on the road. The UK was not built for Brexit. The Dover port is small. It's much smaller than its counterpart in Calais. and there's not a lot of room for expansion. And people in Kent don't like the new lorry parks. You have to pay for vets for these facilities, which is a shortage profession in the UK, along with customs officers to work in these huge facilities, and that can't be cheap. The place they're still paying for security of this facility. That comes at a large cost. And this is especially since the UK love to nickel and dime public sector workers, so they wouldn't be making that much compared to how much they could make in the private sector. A government spokesperson said the Sevington facility would still play a key role in, quote, creating a seamless digital border, end quote, but it is certain to be a lighter touch one than previously envisioned, putting Sevington's sustainability or suitability for purpose into further down. And if that's the case, that you wanted a lighter touch approach, why would you build a state-of-the-art facility that exists for heavy checks and then want to move to a light touch system? If that was the plan from the jump, you could have saved us hundreds of millions of pounds. But you did not plan it, just like you didn't plan anything. And the idea that it would help us create a digital system, like, this facility is not built for digital stuff here. This facility is built for proper checks of, any agri-foods coming into the UK. Ridiculous statements. You got Richard Ballantyne, Chief Executive of the British Ports Association, saying that the Sevington site was a costly mistake caused by the rush to get Brexit done and the failure to foresee what it would entail. He said, quote, "Policymakers have now realised there are some consequences to having a hard border which we don't like, which are costly inspections and delays which harm business. I think they have realised we probably don't need to have these checks because we have similar standards to the EU. We simply don't need to do these things, but there is a big cost to the exchequer," end quote. And the issues here are that not everything moving through the EU or via the EU is safe. We saw that story last year with the tainted meat being stopped at the Dover port. How much more of that stuff is making it into the UK? We have no idea. That kind of meat can make people sick. You still have lots of food-based illnesses like African swine flu. That is in the EU and in parts of the rest of the world. What happens when people have tainted meat and realise they can sell it into the UK because we don't have checks on the meat coming in? This is a recipe for disaster. He added, quote, "I think it would have been better for us to have decided what our departure would look like. You have got to understand the costs and consequences, what the costs and consequences are. There has been a lot of wasted money," end quote. And I agree with that. We had planned this out. Why are we not able to carry out the checks we wanted to, like the French can, if we had planned this properly? I don't know. So suddenly France can do it, the Dutch can do it, but we can't. And I thought we were meant to be world beating. Industry experts say the change of mind runs deeper and suggest that ministers are even considering moving back to closer alignment with the EU for certain traded products, including those of plant and animal origin. And for me, in my opinion, that can't be true, because how can the UK be looking at closer alignment with the EU in terms of for agri-foods, but also look to pass that massive EU deregulation bill, which can effectively get rid of all EU legacy laws we have? Essentially getting rid of a lot of the standards on agri-food products. Who have these industry experts spoken to? Because from my non-expert opinion, that does not seem to be the case. In July 2020, the government announced a £705 million package for border facilities, jobs and technology. About 200 million of this was made available to ports to develop their own facilities, which they did, but many now find they cannot use what they have built. And, that's what they call white elephants. Damn, they've wasted close to £1 billion on these projects. The question is, who will have to pay for the maintenance of these facilities? From what I've read, it will be councils and the ports, which I think the ports are treated as private businesses, which will have to take more money from taxpayers. This also leads to, the council will charge more money to taxpayers, but the ports will start charging more in fees, which we saw last year. That will increase the cost of imports, making another cost to the consumer. So what an absolute mess and waste of taxpayers' money this is, yet no one really seems to be talking about it. And then this is the kicker for me. The Port of Dover received a £45 million investment from the government's Levelling Up Fund, originally envisioned to help deprived parts of the UK, to improve the flow of traffic from the UK to the EU and reduce congestion on local roads post-Brexit. I think Phil mentioned that the Tories will just labour most infrastructure spending as levelling up money, even the stuff that was planned years ago. It shows what a joke that slogan is, and that Labour needs to seize it a lot better. Talk about what a joke levelling up is, continuing to be. Why would a port in wealthy Kent get funds that were aimed at helping deprived areas in the UK? Or at least that's what it was meant to do. So it doesn't make sense to call this levelling up money. I guess you can argue beefing up the port is a part of Brexit, and a part of Brexit is also levelling up. But that argument makes no sense at all. Um, but yeah, I can't make sense of a lot of the stuff this government are doing. But this port facility is a ghost town. There's some security people there. That's about it. It's costing. I'm assuming the council a decent chunk of money. So did the people, the good people of Kent, is this what you voted for when you voted for Brexit? When you voted Tory in 2019, and when you no doubt vote for the Tories in your council elections, is this what you wanted? Because if it is, then you fully deserve it. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.